At 7 o'clock, we will call this meeting to order. First, a closed meeting into closed meeting. Be it resolved, the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County, Virginia hereby enters into a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing the following: 2.2-3711, discussion, consideration of interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining or resignation of specific officers, appointees, or employees of any public body. 1, Adjustment and Appeals Board. 2, Personnel, County Administrator Annual Evaluation. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Supervisor King, second by Supervisor Fidzikowski. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
All right. Supervisor Fidzikowski.
Aye.
Supervisor King.
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs.
Aye.
Supervisor DeMotts.
Aye.
Supervisor Shepard.
Aye.
Chair Blevins.
Aye.
6 ayes.
Into closed session. Thank you.
Thanks.
to come out of closed meeting?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion made by Vice Chair Biggs and a second by Supervisor King. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
All right. Supervisor Shepherd,
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski,
Aye.
Supervisor King,
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs,
Aye.
Supervisor Demots,
Aye.
Chair Blevins,
Aye.
6 ayes.
Out of closed meeting. Certification of closed meeting. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to the affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County, Virginia hereby certifies to the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only public business matters lawfully exempt from the open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certification resolution applies, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion conveying the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Biggs and a second by Supervisor King. I think I heard first. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Supervisor Demots,
Aye.
Supervisor Shepherd,
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski,
Aye.
Supervisor King,
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs,
Aye.
Chair Blevins,
Aye.
6 ayes.
All right. If I could ask Mr. Meadows to lead us in a moment of silence in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, if we could stand, please, for a moment of silence, and then I'll lead us in the pledge. Let us pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. First up is our public hearing. Tonight, we have a public hearing opening for the FY 22-23 budget amendment. This is for adding carryover funding appropriated for the FY 22 for various county projects, purchase orders, capital funds, and various school operating and capital funds that were not completed at the year end, not to exceed $135 million. I will open up that public hearing. Seeing no one come forward, I will close that public hearing. Public address. Let me go over the guidelines. The Board of Supervisors allows citizens to present comments on issues deserving of their attention during public address. A public address sign-up sheet was out front. I will call the names from the sign-up sheet. Then if after that any other citizens would like to speak, they can come forward. Each citizen, as an individual or representative, has 4 minutes. They will direct all the statements to the chair or other supervisors from the speaker's lectern. Each speaker will have 4 minutes. You'll start by stating your name and your address. Debate between speakers and members of the audience will not be allowed. Speakers may leave any written statements or comments with the supervisors with the board clerk. Speakers will be judged out of order should the speaker engage in any personal attacks, use of profanity or abusive language, or debate with the audience and not address the supervisors. An acceptable etiquette is to not applaud or make loud responses. As a reminder, during public address, this is our time to listen to you, so supervisors do not respond. First on the list, I have a Katrina Altizer. Ma'am, you'll have 4 minutes when the yellow light blinks here. That'll be your 1-minute warning. If you'll state your name and address.
Katrina Altizer. I live in Montgomery County. I would like to speak today in support of school vouchers. While I understand there are some wonderful teachers in our school systems and some good people who help to make our schools the best they can. The truth is their school systems has some major issues. Please don't mistake these noted issues as a lack of respect for the good people who just happen to work in the flawed system that isn't working well for so many of our families. My greatest concern is the promotion of gender identity in the schools. I do not feel it is the business of the schools to promote sexual orientation, prouding of different bathroom offering the correct pronoun for those claiming to be of a different sex. Then that's what is noted on their birth certificate. Cause me great concern such issues will take away from the true focus on learning and cause great deal of confusion with the students. In addition, recognize these unacceptable, time-consuming, and confusion mandates others troubled topics added to the confusion. For instance, critical race theory, defunding the police, supporting boys to be drag queens. Such interrupts learning will lead to arguments. I do not support these topics that cause confusions and that take away from the true learning. With parents' choice, funding of the school vouchers can eliminate these concerns. I'm not alone in my concerns. These are many more who share the beliefs, and I'm asking you to award parents the support they need to protect their children from these confusing topics during the school days. Thank you.
Next on the list, John Ashley.
Good evening. My name is Johnny Ashley, and I live in Christiansburg, Virginia. I've been here close to 20 times talking about the family court system, and I've sat through this whole school debate. And as much as I would love to finish going through that paperwork and publicly humiliate people, today isn't about what I want to do, because a dad's first duty is to protect. Last week there was a big turnout. As I walked into the room, I could tell there was something different in the air that night. As I sat in the front row for hours and listened to speaker after speaker, many of them came from Blacksburg, a town whose economy is based on the elite university inside of it. The students throw off the per capita income curve, but the median home value is over twice as much as Christiansburg, the county seat. For hours, I listened to the wealthiest, most affluent residents of Montgomery County ask Montgomery County not to let poor kids go to private school because it helps the rich. If they believe they aren't rich, what else will they believe? I listened for hours in confusion and disgust when I noticed that all these wealthy elitists were wearing leather sandals with no socks. Every time you have seen me, I've had steel toes on my feet since 5:30 that morning. Not once have I shown up like I was dressed to go to the beach. The lady who sent her kids to private school but didn't want poor kids to go was wearing beach footwear. And so was the teacher who called the parents that were concerned about the school system sending their third grade children to a hardcore sex ed class without the parents' knowledge. Crisis actors. I looked down at my 5-year-old Nikes, and I wondered to myself, why are all the wealthy wearing inappropriate footwear for a public event? And then I realized it wasn't tension or excitement in the air. It was stinky feet. If I knew how to dress appropriately, I'm sure they do too. But this has to be an organized effort to make the poor smell the feet of the rich. Please add appropriate footwear to the dress code. Now, my child that was legally abducted by strangers, I have no say in his raising, and I only see him twice a month. He's now 15. He has no idea what happened in 1776 or how to do long division. But when I tell him he's 200 pounds and he needs to exercise or change his diet, he says I'm body shaming him. If I tell him that you can milk a cow but not a bull, I'm transphobic. He hasn't learned anything, and schools have untaught him what he did already know. A few days ago, a school board meeting in Clay County, Florida, a parent tried to read a book from the school library. The meetings were broadcast on local TV, and his microphone was cut off because the FCC considered this children's book pornography. There are thousands of videos made by the TikTok teachers explaining how they will get around laws banning them from teaching certain ideologies. They also make videos about their young students coming out to them with their sexual orientation or gender identity. Gender identity is a mental condition called gender dysphoria, and is recognized by the American Psychiatric Association. Many of the TikTok teachers suffer from this condition, and the rest have Munchausen syndrome because they seek attention by using a child's mental condition or by pressuring them into saying they have one. Just like Drag Queen Story Hour, why are adults with sexual mental conditions seeking out children? Can men have babies? Yes, and the family court needs to recognize that. But no, we cannot bear them. Making you believe something that you know is not true is a basic manipulation tactic. By teaching children that men can have babies, generationally, society is normalizing the lie. After society normalizes the lie, it is easier to add another lie to it. These adults with sexual mental conditions are seeking out children for this next lie. This is their words off their website, www.newgon.net, a website that has been around since 2007 and claims to have coined the phrase minor attracted person and the inverse, adult attracted minor. Aylin Walker was working at Old Dominion University when it caused an uproar after publishing a paper saying that being a minor attracted person was a sexual mental condition. Aylin Walker, who also suffers from gender dysphoria, is frequently cited on this website and now works at the Center for Prevention of Child Abuse in the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. This website talks about changing definitions of words.
Ashley, thank you.
All right, thank you. Have a good night.
Up next, Chris Thomas.
Good evening. Members of the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors, in light of the lengthy public address session in your last meeting, I would like to take some time to clarify some issues raised by members of the board and the community at large. Some members of this board openly wondered why so many have turned out to petition you recently, and, well, you did this. You see, in an 11th hour vote with no public debate, a faction of this board chose to add school vouchers to its legislative priorities list and has since then reputedly impugned the financial integrity of our school board. In so doing, you've shown first that we can't trust you to stick to your published agenda and conduct business in an open and transparent manner, and second, that you're willing to entertain divisive, culture war-driven nonsense at the expense of our community and children. Unfortunately, our local Republican Party was more than willing to exploit those openings for partisan gain, and now here we all are relitigating Griffin v. Prince Edward County. That, by the way, is some of that true history the folks shouting about critical race theory would prefer to keep out of our schools. But you should look it up if you'd like to know more about the deeply racist history of the school voucher movement in this state. And no, it's not ancient history. The crux of this issue is that a public education is a right guaranteed under Article 8 of our state constitution. Our state and localities have a constitutional obligation to provide for that right, even if a parent chooses not to avail themselves of it. Let me say that again. You have a constitutional obligation to provide every child in Montgomery County with an opportunity for public education, even if their parents do not take advantage of it. So by all means, if my fellow residents want their kids to learn creationism rather than evolution, they should feel free to enroll their kids in religious schools. But just as Montgomery County must maintain roads they might never drive on, it must also maintain space for their children in a school system they may not intend to use. And that brings me to my final point, why they may not intend to use it. One of the speakers at a previous board meeting said it best. She said, and I quote here, "As a student, we are all put together and we don't have any support behind us if we want to speak different opinions. We all have to agree on one certain thing. We all have to accept everybody." Unquote. We have to accept everybody. This is the great injustice which school vouchers have always been used to combat. The requirement that our schools look at all students, Black, white, Christian, atheist, queer, straight, and welcome them into a classroom which neither condones nor contributes to their ostracism and marginalization. So again, I remind you, if members of this county want to indoctrinate their own children to believe as they believe, that is their right, and there are options available for them to do so right now. But that choice does not relieve this board or this county of its obligation to provide a seat in a public classroom for all students, regardless of their race, their gender identity, their religion, or yes, their intention to fill it. And that's why even if everyone in this room speaking in favor of vouchers chooses to send their kids to a private school, we must still fund a building, a classroom, a teacher, and a desk for each and every one of their children. And that is why public funds cannot go to private schools. Thank you.
Next up, Patty Talbert.
Good evening. I am Patty Talbot. I live at 201 Eakin Street Southwest in Blacksburg. And I'd like to say good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of public education with special thanks to Montgomery County School Board, the educators, and the many support staff that keep our school system running along quite well despite the many challenges. I also want to thank each of you on this board who have chosen to serve in such a huge and often thankless role. You could all be at home with your families instead of showing up here week after week to listen carefully and consider how to allocate our tax dollars fairly and reasonably to serve all of us. Thank you to Supervisor Biggs, who clarified the point that this board cannot entertain any real initiative around school vouchers without action from the Virginia General Assembly in that regard. Nevertheless, I want to go on record here as standing strongly against any such measures. I thank the committed citizens who showed up to voice their concerns a couple of weeks ago, and I most certainly agree with those speaking against siphoning off public funds in support of private education. But I'm still appreciative of the courage of those who believe passionately in an albeit misguided idea that funds should follow the child. It does not work that way without perhaps less obvious and harder to follow repercussions to the public schools that are the very foundation of our democratic society. I'm here as a private citizen and a happy taxpayer who gets a lot for my tax dollars because of you. My words are informed by my nearly 4 decades as an educator, parent, and now as a grandparent. But they're also informed by my upbringing as the daughter of a minister in the United Methodist Church. I mention this only because of the religious arguments of many voucher supporters. What I hope you noticed in your listening is that public education advocates back up their pleas with facts and figures and voices for the public good, not just their own children, but everyone's child. I hope you notice, too, that a lot of voucher supporters tend to rest their arguments in individual vignettes about bad experiences that are, 1, either based in hearsay, or 2, not properly worked through with the highly committed professional educators in our community who work, like you, tirelessly to hear and address student and parent concerns as they arise. The promise of democracy is a bold, audacious, and often messy proposition. The promise of public schools may be even bolder and more audacious, and sometimes messy too. That we will educate every child, no matter their circumstance or perceived limitations, to the best of our ability, not only for life, not only for work, but to participate fully as equals in our democracy. That participation begins in our public schools, where everyone learns that everyone matters. From a very young age, I learned that my faith and my values follow me wherever I go, in religious and non-religious settings. I learned that I do not need to fear diverse perspectives, but that I benefit from them. And I'll leave my comments. Thank you.
That completes the list for the sign-up. If any citizen would like to come forward, you have 4 minutes to address the board, if you'll state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Bob Beard. I live here in Christiansburg. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I think we all have to say there's small miracles. There's actually something that Glenn Shilcoat said last week I actually agree with. He said he thought it was foolish to defund the police. So me and Glenn are actually in agreement on something. I actually wanted to ask you guys to rewatch what Glenn spoke last week, or last session. He said a good bit of stuff. But what he did was regarding the defund the police, he used that as an analogy to say the tax dollars following a student would ruin the school system. Glenn spewed a whole laundry list of BS claims. lies. Glenn also reminded us that the Board of Supervisors has no authority over curriculum or policy. Okay, so this is the second time he's done that. So he's letting you guys know that it doesn't matter what you guys say or do. You have no authority or policy over them. So you guys can't dictate budget or have any interaction or any try to oversight on to try to how to make the school system better. Glenn also said several times that we have a great school system. If we have such a great school system, then why does MCS need a teachers union? What's going to happen to all that money? We've got 850 teachers, about $30 a month per teacher. What happens to those millions of dollars? Those millions of dollars those teachers are paying to go in to be part of that union, are those dollars staying here in town? Are those dollars being used to create political PACs? You got a board of supervisors here who benefited from that MCA. The teachers have received pay increases. We're saying there's great teachers. We've never said there wasn't any bad teachers. Just like the analogy of there's some great teachers, but there might be a couple bad ones. That's all we're saying. Well, all we want is to get the politics and the sexualization of our kids out of the school system. When you have a parent praising the school, they called her and sent her a letter home. I want to teach your third grader about different parts of sex, an 8-year-old. Why does a parent is proud to have her 8-year-old child be taught sex? I think Lynn also said this is society issues. Well, you're damn right it is. Having parents, 8-year-old being taught sex. Then we had, so my question is, if the school budgets are increasing and we have a 50% increase in homeschooling last year, versus from 2019 to 2021, we had a 50% increase in homeschooling. Okay, we have decreases in ADM. That means average attendance. Okay, we're having all those different things, but they get more money. Okay, so that's why we're talking about vouchers. Okay, and if overcrowding is an issue in certain schools, then why don't we redraw the lines and move certain schools? Because East Montgomery and those schools are at half capacity or very low. So I've bounced around a little bit, but thank you so much.
Would anybody else like to come forward to address the board? You'll have 4 minutes if you'll state your name and address.
Good evening, thank you. I would like to read.
If you will state your name and address.
I'm
please.
sorry, my name is Kim Bowman, and I live here in Christiansburg. And the words that I'm using tonight are not my own, but this lady, Rebecca Friedrich, said it pretty much like I would if I put it in my own words, so I thought I would share. She is a veteran public school educator, and she says that the voices of teachers have been silenced for decades by unions who claim to represent them. They do not represent them. When other dedicated teachers that served with her in unions spoke up in defense of children, parents, scientific fact, and American values, but for their trouble, instead they were brutalized, booted off the platform, barred from committees, shouted down, and even spit on by union leaders. This is how unions are devoted to our teachers. What's even worse is how the agenda of control deceives Americans and our children. They have intentionally rewrote American history to perpetrate division and to pervert the memories of our American founders and to disparage our Judeo-Christian virtues. Their lenient disciplinary policies morphed our schools into war zones, and they have defunded, back to defunding of both police and abolishing ICE. Unions collect billions every year from unsuspecting teachers and push this radical agenda into their classrooms against their will. Why? The only way to keep a free republic is with a well-educated, moral citizenry that can self-govern. Unions are severing a republic, so they undermine educational excellence, morality, law, and order. That's why they spend hundreds of millions of dollars annually to defeat charter schools and school choice, trapping so many of our precious low-income children in dangerous, corrupt, and low-performance schools. Now, if you think this isn't coming to our hometown, you're not doing your homework. Contrary to what unions would have us believe, the biggest reasons why teachers are leaving the public school system is behavior problems, followed by their progressive politics. And there are statistics on that if you want to look them up. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to come forward to address the board?
My name is Joanne Price, Blacksburg, Virginia. Many parents and citizens see the absurdity of what's happening in Montgomery County Public Schools. Equity, inclusion, and diversity sounds good on the surface, but there's no foundation beneath it. The foundation that I'm talking about are things like self-discipline, self-control, a knowledge of right and wrong, principles of math. All of these constructs are moral constructs. And what is common to most Americans seems to be nonsense to the members of this school board. So I have to ask the question. So why are teachers leaving? Why are parents leaving? And why are students wanting to leave? So I just heard a gentleman say we need to maintain classrooms for those people who have already left. Well, I happen to be a financial advisor, and I teach accounting, and I also teach government accounting. And how many know that that is absolutely absurd? That's an absurdity that we're talking about. And we are turning out people from our school system who do not understand the fundamental principles of accounting. 80% of Americans are financially illiterate. That's why they're in debt. That's why they can't save for the future. They don't know how, and they came from the schools. I teach in corporate, government, and military. And guess what? Those kids came out of our schools. And I understand and know exactly what's being taught. They don't have common sense, and they don't have the fundamental principles that the founding of this nation was established upon. So parents are pulling their children from failing public schools. Why has there been a 50% increase in homeschoolers since 2019 in Montgomery County? That's a real question that the school board needs to answer. The other question is, the school board needs to understand, and also those proponents of wanting to keep the funding in the public schools and not follow the child, is they talk about public money. There is no public money. Every dime that goes into the U.S. Treasury and the state Treasury comes from taxpayers. It's taxpayer money. Our government was based and built upon the fund accounting, which is governed by general accounting, government accounting standards, different than for-profit accounting, which means that it's a system of funds. And funds cannot be removed from one fund to another fund unless through legislation. It's called an appropriation, has to be voted upon. You just don't move money. And so when they were talking about the 7 categories, they were really talking about funding accounts, and you cannot move money that way. It's illegal. You are violating government principles of fund accounting. So there is a broad span of ignorance that has been displayed in this place over the last few sessions that we've been talking about. So that begs the point why, if I were a parent in Montgomery County Public Schools, I absolutely would pull my child. And I would want my money to follow my child so that my child can get a common sense, principle-based education. And that is the right of every parent. And it should be the ideal for every parent, for their child. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to come forward? Hi, if you'll state your name and address, you'll have 4 minutes.
My name is Beverly Bond. I live in Blacksburg, Virginia, and I want to thank you all for giving me this opportunity to speak. I'm a grandmother, and I worry about my grandchildren's education. And the way I feel about it is, if public schools are doing such good jobs, why is everyone so worried? Certainly, parents want the very best education for their children. The real focus shouldn't be on public versus private schools. Rather, it should be that each child should get the education that best suits their needs. Not every child can really adjust totally to a public school. Sometimes they need a little bit more attention, and they can get that in a private school. And that's the most important thing, because one of these days that child's going to grow up, and they're going to be faced with getting out there in life and living it the best that they can be able to do it. And they have to be armed with the tools to be able to live a very productive life. And I know that sometimes children I know of one young man that I used to be a neighbor with his mom and him over in Radford, and he fought like a tiger to not go to school. He did everything he could, to the point that they threatened to put his mother in jail because she wouldn't make him go to school. This young man died at the age of 16 from complications of diabetes that he did not know that he had. And he had just got his first job, his first driver's license, his first car, and everything, and he was fixing to really take off. He was 16 years old, never got to finish his education, never got to. And my heart bled for that family. But not every child can adjust to be gung-ho, to get up for school every morning and go. They need something different, and that's where the vouchers come in. Because then you can find the school that suits your child, not the school that your child will suit. And the real focus shouldn't be on public versus private school. Rather, it should be that each child should get the education that best suits their needs. Hope scholarships are not a government handout. There's approximately $15,000 in the federal, state, and county funds that are appropriated for each student. That money should be available to provide the best education for that child. There are opposing views that consider school vouchers, known as Hope scholarships, to be handouts. A handout is giving our public school dollars to people that shouldn't be getting it. This is a handout. It's ludicrous to believe that school choice through Hope scholarships would reduce public school funding without a corresponding reduction in public school expenses. Over 80% of our public school dollars are spent on payroll and employee benefits. Common sense says that if student populating is significantly reduced, sometimes maybe even more teachers could spend more time with each child. I was blessed to have a niece that went to school at Reiner, and she got the education that she needed, plus she got the extra attention that she so desperately needed. And the thing is that all this arguing over vouchers versus public school funding and everything. There's always going to be education out there for our children. Always. It just depends on how we use it and grasp onto it for them.
Would anybody else like to come forward to address the board?
Good evening. My name is Wayne Coleman, and I live right outside of Blacksburg in Montgomery County. And I'd like to encourage you, just take a moment and pray for you and pray the Lord's blessing on you. You know, we've been to these meetings for quite a while now. I missed a little time. I ended up getting what they call COVID, and I was in the hospital. That was in 2001, so had a while of recovery. We couldn't come for that time, but we come because we want to be involved in what you're doing, and we want to see what's going on in our county and want to try to understand, and we want to know how to pray. I've been in situations where I didn't know the solution. Lots of situations over the years. And I can imagine myself sitting in the seat that you're sitting in, trying to figure out what is the ideal solution that's helpful to each person, that really meets the need. And that motivates us to pray for you. We pray for you every day. I have to admit, we don't pray on Sundays because we're tied up in church and everything else every Sunday, but we pray every single day for each of you by name, that the Lord would give you wisdom. And I pray that right now, that the Lord Most High would touch you in your heart, in your mind, give you the peace that surpasses understanding, that you would know His hand of comfort and guidance upon you, that you wouldn't ever feel beat down, but if you start to feel that way, that He would touch you in a special way, maybe show you something in the sky, something in your home, something that falls over and breaks just to get your attention, that yes, I am here, saith the Lord. I am with you. I will guide you. I will give you the answers that you're so desperately seeking. I will protect you, and I will preserve you and your families. That's what the Lord is saying, and that's what our heart is crying out. So be blessed, be at peace, and know that the Lord is watching over you, and He knows you by name. Amen.
Anyone else?
My name is Beth Umberger. I live in Christiansburg, Virginia, and I got my shoes on. I didn't intend to speak, but I homeschooled my children part of the time. I had foster kids and a birth daughter and adopted daughter. But the whole time that I did that, I got Volunteer of the Year in the public schools. I served on the PTA board. I wholly support public education. It is extremely important that we have that. I don't have any children in the schools right now, but I still want to pay my tax money and have good education. We have sports programs, we have art programs, we have music programs, we have PE programs. I'm hoping at some point, been thinking about this, that we can add a horticultural person for the elementary schools to teach vegetable gardening and native plants, have a permanent habitat. I've worked on those properties myself. I've spent hours at Bellevue and at Christiansburg Elementary. Some of those gardens are gone now because we have nice facilities for the kids to use, the gymnasiums. These are centers of a community. When Bethel Elementary School closed, I planted plants there too. It was a sad thing for that community. They lost their sense of community. All the wonderful aides that are going straight to heaven that work in the school system with these kids. I've had kids that I substituted for who I thought that I had to give them a hard time. And they've come up to me, and I'll be gardening somewhere, and they'll be really friendly, and I thought we had a hard time. But it's important that these kids know that we care about them and that every child is served. If you choose not to, I chose at some points in my life to educate my own children at home. But I never thought about not paying taxes or asking the school to give me money for my children. So I hope that we continue to support public schools, and the teachers and the teachers' unions are not going to hurt anything. They're just trying to get better situations for them to teach in. They're not going to hurt anything. I'm really grateful for all that y'all do, and this has been a hard time. And I really support public schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one come forward, I will close public address. Next, addendum.
No addendum this evening, Madam Chair.
All right. Items of consent. Do I have a motion?
Second.
I have a motion by Supervisor King, a second by Vice Chair Biggs. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor DeMotts? Aye. Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidjakowski?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Next up, old business. Do I have a motion to remove from the table ordinance amending Chapter 10 zoning relating to short-term rentals and lodging uses?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion by Supervisor Fidjakowski and second by Supervisor King. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor DeMotts? Aye. Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidjakowski?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Next up,
Madam Chair and board members, I believe Bree's, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. You need to.
that's okay. I was gonna let that come in discussion. If I have a motion for the ordinance amending Chapter 10 zoning related to short-term rentals and lodging use.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Biggs, second by Supervisor Fidjakowski, and now we will open up discussion. And I see Ms. Bree, if she'll
Thank you.
come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So I had sent you an email with an update, and it's also included in your board docs, but we wanted to go over it publicly so members of the public could hear this as well, in addition to you. We did hold a public hearing on May 23rd, and then following that at the June 13th meeting, we did have a citizen speak during public address regarding some concerns. So planning staff has taken some time. We've made a few minor amendments to the ordinance to provide some clarification, and then we have some other concerns that we wanted to address to further explain what we were thinking. So the first concern, under the proposed changes, full-time management required for a bed and breakfast would lead someone having to hire a manager. That's not our intent. We want to make sure that if you have a short-term rental and you live out of state, that there is actually someone here local that can be on call. If there's a maintenance issue or, God forbid, an emergency, we need to have someone local that can respond to that. And it does not require an owner to hire someone. It just requires that they have a contact locally. They do not have to be on premises either. So the discrepancy between the definition of bed and breakfast inn and the may provide food. We did add a clarifying statement here. If you do not provide food, of course, you do not have to get VDH approval, but if you are providing food, then you have to have that approval from them. So our clarifying statement is, if providing food to guests, then the establishment shall meet the requirements. I do want to note that there are other requirements the Virginia Department of Health has as well for short-term lodging, and so those requirements are also included in the supplemental regs, and they would have to be met as well. The requirement for bed and breakfast inn to be located on a public road is too restrictive. This is standard in our ordinance. A lot of our commercial uses, we require them to be located on a public road. And the reason for that is when someone obtains a private access easement across someone's property, generally it's for a single-family dwelling. And so when you turn that into a commercial use, then you have more traffic, and then that leads to civil disputes. They in turn call us wanting us to enforce the private access easement and not allow the commercial use on the property. So we have kept this with our standards. Bed and breakfast inns now do require to have location on a public road. So they have to be accessed currently. So that's not actually anything that's any different from what we already had in the ordinance. How is maximum occupancy determined by the Virginia Department of Health? This is standard even if you come in to obtain a permit for a single-family dwelling. We require you to tell us how many bedrooms you have because that is how the health department issues its septic permits. Septics are determined based on occupancy, based on the number of bedrooms. So they allow 2 people per bedroom. So if it's a 4-bedroom house, it's an 8-person occupancy. This will be handled in the same way. We will require documentation from the health department, whether it be a septic permit, safe, adequate, and proper form, or any other documentation they deem necessary to show that they actually have the occupancy level in the septic system for the number of guests they would plan to have on site. The next concern, there is no reference to specific sections of the Fire Prevention Code. Fire Prevention Code is rather lengthy, and there are different sections that apply. So there would actually need to be a whole list. In addition to that, we all know that codes and sections change. So if you reference a specific section and then it gets changed by the state later on, then we would have to come back and do an ordinance amendment every time. So we actually worded this with help from the building official. And in addition, when someone comes in to get their permit for a bed and breakfast inn or a short-term rental, they'll be given a list of things that they need to comply with, and then the building official will in turn help walk them through the fire safety code. Requiring local points of contact seems excessive. Isn't this the sheriff's office responsibility? A local list of contacts within the rental, it ensures that whoever is staying there, especially if they're not familiar with the county, they have contact numbers for anyone they may reach in the area. Whether that be the Virginia Department of Health, maybe there's a health issue, they may need to reach the local emergency contact. Same as posting emergency numbers at most of our businesses. This is just kind of standard procedure. What will happen when they come in to get their permit, they'll also have to get a building permit for a change in use, and the building official will inspect to make sure these numbers are posted on site, so all the renters have contact information. Local phone service requirement. This was actually something the Planning Commission and staff debated quite a bit. We didn't want to say landline service because we understand that there are plenty of areas in the county that have good internet, good cell service, and so they may not have a landline. Landlines are becoming a thing of the past. At the same time, we also understand there's areas of the county that are very remote and they have very bad cell service or they don't have internet at this time. So we wanted to make sure we would allow either or. So we have added some clarifying language that basically says the short-term tourist rental shall provide a connection to local phone service, and then in parentheses we said via cellular service, landline, or internet-based phone services. So they're not limited to a landline. They just have to provide some way for their occupants to contact the outside world. This is the long one. The changes to the bed and breakfast homestay, bed and breakfast inn, and addition of short-term tourist rental with the additional regulations will take away the opportunities. So currently there are only 2 options for a short-term rental. You either have a bed and breakfast homestay, that means I live there and I'm renting out the entire house, or a portion of the house. So like I'm renting it out and I'm going away for the weekend. That is done by a zoning permit only, $30. Bed and breakfast inn, these are the ones you've seen more often. So I own a property and maybe I live in a house, but I have an accessory dwelling outside and I want to do it as a short-term rental. Well, you would have to come in and get a special use permit. It's about $800 to go through that process, plus the 3 months. That has been very confusing to property owners because a lot of them are like, well, if I attached it, then it would be attached to my house and I wouldn't have to get a special use permit, which is very true, but it's still considered detached. Also, the costs have been prohibitive. So we created a merge of the bed and breakfast homestay and bed and breakfast inn that allows the property owners to utilize either the home they're living in, an accessory dwelling, or even a dwelling that's on a contiguous parcel. That's another one of the ones that you had seen. They owned a big farmhouse and had a cabin on an adjoining property and wanted to use it as a rental. So that was the bed and breakfast inn that came to you all. Under the new ordinance, that would be considered by right. So they would not have to come in for a special use permit. Then we added short-term tourist rental, which is I own a house and I live here in Reiner, but maybe my house that I'm renting is in Price's Fork. I can still rent that house by right. So I would not need an SUP in the agricultural zoning district. So as a comparison, we have this table. You can see the current regulations and the items that are allowed by right and by special use permit based on zoning district, and then the proposed regulations and what's allowed by right and SUP. You can see in our residential zoning districts, we require SUPs, and that's because those are smaller lots, so there's more chance to have an impact to adjoining neighbors. And with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you, Bree, for the presentation. We'll go around the room. I'll start off with Supervisor DeMotts. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Just a couple of questions for you, and it's really just to clarify in my own mind. For the local point of contact for emergencies, and the question that you had posted was wouldn't the sheriff's office be sufficient? Is that more to like if there was if the power was out, if there was a flood or not a flood, I'm sorry, a burst pipe and they needed to call a plumber or something like that?
Right.
Is that what that's looking more
Right.
identified?
There needs to be a local contact because if you have a pipe that's busted, you're going to need somebody to come over and take care of it.
So not somewhere where we would want a renter calling the sheriff's office and saying
Because
my
there's a
supply line
busted
to my
pipe.
toilet
Correct.
is leaking. Okay, gotcha.
Correct.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. And then on the same slide, for local access to a phone, not having to be a landline phone, does it mean access to a cell phone signal? Or,
Yes.
Okay, so it wouldn't have to be a cell phone provided. It would just have to be verified.
Correct. Correct. And when they get their zoning permits, we've already developed a checklist. And it's items that they'll have to go through and say, I certify their cell service or internet service. Like they're going to have to initial all those off and then sign it. So that way we know that they are aware that these are the things they're supposed to have for their renters.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Shepherd.
I don't have any questions. It looks to me like it's a lot more user-friendly, and I assume that was the
Yes.
point.
Yes.
That's all I have.
Supervisor Fidzikowski.
Just to clarify on the location on the public road, you're not saying they have to be on the road, they just have to be, the property has to be on a road.
They
So
have to have access to the public road.
But if they had a quarter-mile driveway, that's fine.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, that's all I got. And I agree with Supervisor Shepherd. It does seem to make it more user-friendly, so.
Good, thank you.
Supervisor King.
I have no question, but I do appreciate you going back through this, you and your staff, and y'all doing a great job.
Thank you. They make me look good.
Vice Chair Biggs.
I too appreciate all the work and the reworking and everything. My only question is, how do we get the word out because I know there is a lot going on in the county, but how do we sort of spread that news about
That is
what
the
there's-
next step. We're hoping to come up with something with the Commissioner of Revenue's office because a lot of people are registering with the Commissioner of Revenue's office. And then they think they have approval by the county at that point. So we're hoping to give the Commissioner of Revenue's office some of our forms. Maybe they can hand them out and say, be sure you go and get your zoning, that type of thing. That will help with some. I will tell you, we probably have a handful right now that are waiting on this ordinance amendment so they can come in and get their zoning permits because they qualify for the by right, whereas before they would have to have a SUP.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bree, thank you for the presentation, and I do agree with Supervisor Shepherd and Fidzikowski. It is a lot user-friendly, and thank you for taking the time to answer those questions. I have just a few. Local contact, what's your definition of local? In the New River Valley or?
Yes, probably. Somebody that can be there within an hour, I would say.
Within an hour.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay. And going back on the facility having cell service, so will we have in the agreement for renters that they'll have their, so Verizon serves this area, but it will be my obligation as a renter to make sure I have a cell phone?
Correct.
And that would be clearly understood in that agreement?
Correct.
language.
That would be between the renter and the occupant, the tenant. But we would make it clear that they need to be sure that's provided.
And the Post-it list of emergency contacts or local contacts, how detailed is that list? Are we just going to?
I think fire, rescue, 911, of course, and then probably something like the health department, because those tend to be the agencies, maybe even the building official. But I would not expect much more than that.
Very good. That's all I have. And do I have any follow-up? Bree, thank you for the presentation. Very good. No more discussion. Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor DeMotts?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to new business. First that we have up is School Capital Fund and encumbrances carryover.
Board members, this is the request that we receive each year to roll over capital project balances and capital project encumbrances. This one is for the Montgomery County Public Schools. And
And we do have Dr. Whitaker and Chair Cass or someone to answer questions. Right?
I'll
Have a
move
motion?
it to put
Motion?
on the floor, yeah.
Okay, motion, and do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Biggs and a second by Supervisor DeMotts, and now we'll open it up for discussion.
Chair Blevins, can I ask one question or just kind of a clarifying point? When we had the public hearing earlier for the 22-23 budget amendment, that $135 million price tag raised some eyebrows in the audience. And so I think that it would probably be wise maybe for the county administrator to speak to.
I'm going to kick it to the.
Okay.
deputy.
Just because that's a really, really high and very unusual balance for us to be carrying forward. I know the reason that it's there, but I think some clarity for the
I'd be
total
glad to
would be
do that.
good.
The
Thank
reason
you.
that it is so large is because it includes all of the capital projects that are being carried forward for the county and for the schools, including their purchase orders for those funds. And since we recently issued debt for the Christiansburg High School, the cumulative total was estimated at $135 million. The actual appropriations are all included under new business, and they do total less than that, but we can't go over it, so that's why it's so much this year.
So for like the debt that we just issued and the amount of, I think it was 90 million for the schools.
We did have a public
Then-
hearing, yes,
Yeah,
that's
and
right.
then the 10 million-ish that we issued on the county side. and
Yes,
all of those.
that's
So I
right.
just wanted to make sure, because I saw a couple of people in the audience kind of say, what? I wanted to
Right.
make sure that that was clear.
And Angie said that much more eloquently than I could, because I was just going to say it's just an all-encompassing number for all of these resolutions under new business.
It usually is not this large, you're
No.
correct.
Thank you. All right, so now we have Dr. Whitaker. Thank you, ladies, and Chair Cass for discussion.
Good evening.
Good evening. We'll go around the room to see if any supervisors have any questions. We'll start off with Supervisor Shepherd.
I don't have any questions.
Very good. Supervisor Fidzikowski.
No questions.
Thank you. Supervisor King.
No questions.
Supervisor DeMott.
I don't have any questions. Thank you all for being here tonight. I know we are just as excited as you guys. You guys are probably more excited to get Christiansburg
We are
underway.
ready.
Yeah, so glad that you're here and glad that we're able to keep moving forward.
Vice Chair Biggs.
No questions, ready to move.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ladies, for being here. I do have just a quick question on the amounts for the reappropriation.
Sure.
I'm looking at, we're reappropriating Christiansburg primary renovations of almost 1.2 million, and Christiansburg Elementary and Bellevue. Just for clarification, those are from the original $10 million, and this is just carryover.
Yes, Ms. Miano can probably speak from the original source, but yes, it is the carryover to finish out those projects. Christiansburg Elementary and Primary, they'll be finished, Christiansburg, Elementary and Bellevue, they'll be ready for the start of school, and then Christiansburg Primary, it'll be finished in December. So we're just finishing those projects up.
Yes, ma'am. And then that will finish and complete those projects?
And we'll finish and complete all of the work on those projects that was included in them, yes.
And that was the 30 million issue.
I'm
35.
sorry,
Yeah. 35.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep, thank you.
Yes, okay, yes. And then, are you anticipating any leftovers from those projects?
Do you know what the encumbrance is, Ms. Miano?
I know there's encumbrances. I don't know if we're gonna have a balance left yet. We're still trying to determine to close out those projects.
Okay. all
Yeah,
right.
since they're still in process.
Yes, ma'am, very good. And then on the Christiansburg High School renovation additions, 92 million, and can you explain where those funds for? Because 90 million was for the
Was
bond.
the amount.
Yes.
So $5 million was originally issued by the Board of Supervisors so that we could begin our planning work with the architects. And so you had given us $5 million before the bond issuance was made so that we could begin that work. And that's why that balance is more than the 90. I believe a couple items down on the agenda, you see that $5 million being moved back, but that's an absolute great question. It is definitely more than the 90. So that's why we've been paying the architects to do the work, of the planning for us.
Right, okay, so that's the 5 million for that included, and so are you including all of the $90 million towards that Christiansburg project?
Yes,
Originally,
that
it was-
is where all those funds had been placed, and so those are in the Christiansburg High School project. I do anticipate that at this time, that's where they'll be needed.
Okay, so we had originally thought maybe 85 for the school and 5 for maybe additional, but now all going the 90.
Yeah, as you guys know, the cost of everything is not getting cheaper at all. So we, every day we move forward, things are costing 20 to 30% more than when we began this process. So I do foresee that is where all of those funds will be needed.
Yes, ma'am, thank you for that, because when we said 90 and then you have 92, just making sure, and then you are going to transfer the $5 million back to our general fund.
That's
Wouldn't it?
correct.
Or later today.
Yeah, it's somewhere down the agenda.
Item C, under
Yes.
new business.
Ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, ladies, all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Supervisor Shepherd,
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski,
Aye.
Supervisor King, Supervisor Biggs,
Aye.
Supervisor DeMott,
Aye.
Chair Blevins,
Aye.
6 ayes.
Next up, we have school debt service one-time funding.
So moved.
Have a motion.
Second.
Motion by Vice Chair Biggs, second by Supervisor DeMott. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Supervisor DeMott,
Aye.
Supervisor Shepherd,
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski,
Aye.
Supervisor King,
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Next, school capital fund transfer to general fund.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Biggs, second by Supervisor Fidzikowski. Any discussion? And this is the $5 million that we gave them to start the process, and that's coming back
That's
to
to
our
move it
general
back.
fund.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor DeMotts?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Next up, FY '22 year-end grant balances, encumbrance carryover.
Big.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
Yep.
skipped
Skip
one.
D.
Sorry,
That's all
let's
right.
go back. FY '22 general fund encumbrance carryover.
So moved.
I have a motion.
Second.
Motion made by Vice Chair Biggs, second by Supervisor Fidzikowski. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor DeMotts?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Now on E, FY '22 year-end grant balances, encumbrances carryover.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Biggs and second by Supervisor DeMotts. Any discussion? I just want one clarification on the emergency services grants. That's for our volunteer services, and that is not for fire and EMS department, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Good. Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor DeMotts?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
6 ayes.
F, FY '22 carryover county capital fund project balance and purchase orders.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. A motion by Vice Chair Biggs, second by Supervisor DeMotts. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor DeMotts?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
6 ayes.
On G now, FY '22 carryover general fund earmarked balances.
So moved.
Second.
I
There'll
have,
be second.
okay, have a motion by Supervisor Fidzikowski, a second by Supervisor Shepherd. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Supervisor DeMotts?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
6 ayes.
H, donations, FY '22 balances.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Biggs, a second by Supervisor Shepherd. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye, and it's nice to have donations.
Supervisor DeMotts?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
6 ayes.
I, American Rescue Plan Act carryover.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Biggs and a second by Supervisor Shepherd. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, if you'll please call the roll.
Supervisor King?
Aye.
Supervisor Biggs?
Aye.
Supervisor DeMotts?
Aye.
Supervisor Shepherd?
Aye.
Supervisor Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Chair Blevins?
Aye.
6 ayes.
Very good. That exciting part of the evening, County Attorney report.
Just a quick update on the opioid litigation. Payments are going to start flowing this week on the settlement that the county entered into with the distributors, county and all the other localities. So there'll be a more specific press release going out in Jennifer's office, kind of explaining it. But this will be the first payment over 16 years. So, and we should get 3 payments this year because there's 1 payment in escrow, 1 payment for this year, and then there'll be another payment with another defendant. So As to the other parties in litigation, the farmer one's still in bankruptcy. We're waiting for the circuit court at the federal level to decide what they're going to do with that. Once that gets settled out, there'll be payments coming from that. And then the other area that there has not been a settlement yet is with the pharmacies. And so that litigation's still moving forward, and we'll see, if they come along and decide to settle. They haven't so far, but we'll see where that goes. So if you have any questions, just let me know. But it's moving forward. It's going to take a little while, but it's moving forward.
Very good. County Administrator report.
Just a few things this evening, Madam Chair. First off, thanks for all the support on the appropriations this evening. I always say that, this is the last fiscal step in getting 22-23 all set up, and it usually takes a little while to get through all that information. So thank you very much for your support on that. I did want to mention that if you haven't noticed out back recently, the general services and PSA facilities are really coming along out there. The estimated completion for those is mid to late October, assuming that we don't have supply chain issues or other problems that could arise, but excited about that. And as that gets closer, we'll certainly let you know when the grand opening will be for those facilities. And last but not least, very glad to have Amy Marshall here with us tonight. Vicky's taken some well-deserved vacation, so Amy, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you. All right. Supervisor reports. Let's start off with Supervisor Fidzikowski.
No report.
No report. Supervisor King.
No report, but I do appreciate everybody coming out and joining us at the meeting tonight. It's really good to see citizens get involved.
Supervisor DeMott.
I don't have a lengthy report. I do want to pass along, we had our Parks and Rec meeting last week for that commission, and they are all just delighted with the direction that we're going with the Auburn Park and how wonderful Creed Fields Park has been received. And so I did tell them that I would pass along that information, that everybody is very, very excited. And then also the pool is doing awesome this summer. The Frog Pond camps are all fully attended. And it's been a real blessing this summer to have fully staffed lifeguards so we can operate the pool at max capacity, so more people and families can get out there. So they're really doing great, and wanted to make sure that I communicated that to all of you.
Thank you. Supervisor Shepherd.
I don't have any report. Thank you.
Vice Chair Biggs.
Just a couple things here. Thank the school staff for being here and school board chair for being here tonight. And sort of following along that route, just wanted to remind everyone that on Saturday, August 27th, there'll be a dialogue on race, and the focus that afternoon, it's going to be from 4 to 6, and it's going to be focused on public education, which seems to be drawing everyone together here in our meetings. So that might be something that you want to register for. And the final thing I want to say, I was so disappointed not to be able to attend the 5-year anniversary celebration for the Animal Care and Adoption Center. Those of you that don't know the history know that it took 22 years to have that happen. It's something I brought up when I first got on the board, and along with former Assistant County Administrator Carol Edmonds, we were finally able to keep pushing and pushing. It took a long time, and I so want to thank the staff and the volunteers and our citizens and their taxpayer money that went, but we get a lot of donations there of food and blankets and towels and people coming in and volunteering to walk the dogs and interact with the cats. And it's become a destination place for people to go in our community. And it's so important for our community's animals. And so it's something that's very dear to my heart, and I hope that if you haven't had a chance to go, that you will go and visit the Animal Care and Adoption Center on Cinnabar Road. And I'm so glad that Chair Blevins put pictures up so I could see what was going on. Thank you.
We missed you, and I know how much you were very greatly missed there. And I will say that Ms. Biggs has donated a community room there, her and Ms. Edmonds for Adoption Center, and so we greatly appreciate that service. They call it the happy place, and it is with the little kittens and the dogs. And Ms. Hill was there, and it's so great to see members of our leadership team there to support and celebrate in that 5-year anniversary. So congratulations to our volunteers, the staff, and everyone that donate. While we were there, someone adopted a cat, Phoebe, so it was a great day all around, lots of fun activities, so it was a great day. Also wanted to do just a couple other congratulations to our Guns and Hoses softball game that supported our Special Olympics this past weekend, and I understand that the firefighters won, so congratulations to them all for a great cause for our Special Olympics. Wanted to also congratulate Sinkland Farms on their second annual Sunflower Festival, over 20 varieties to choose from, and so it was very beautiful. Lots of families taking the opportunity to picture for pictures and stuff. It was very pretty out there. And then the last thing I wanted to remind everyone, Montgomery County and Christiansburg Citizen Academy registration is now open. The deadline is August the 15th, and that meets every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. starting September through the end of October. And if you want to learn how your tax dollars work in local government, this is a great opportunity where they all aspects from our emergency services, how local government works, and so I encourage citizens to apply, and that deadline is coming up on August the 15th, and if you need more information, you can contact Jennifer Harris, and that number would be 381-6887. And anything else? Then we stand adjourned. Thank you.